I'm Jennyfer Holmes, the Senior Scholarship and Development Officer here at the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here today. We did not order the rain, but we do thank you so much for making the trek out here this morning to talk a little bit about ensuring college access through scholarships, opportunities, and challenges, a college's perspective. I would like to start by just sharing a little bit with you about the scholarship program here at the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving. Our scholarship funds are all created by people, individuals and couples and families, as well as organizations, businesses, professional and civic associations of all types here in the Hartford region, including all 29 towns that we serve. And while the situations of all of these donors vary, they all share one motivation, which we know you all share with us today, and that's helping students afford a college education. So why consider a scholarship fund here at the foundation? One of the reasons would be our experience. Our first scholarship fund was actually created in 1942, and the first award was made 3 years after that. So for more than 70 years, students and donors alike have given all that they can to make sure that they can reach their philanthropic and educational goals here in the greater Hartford area. We think our scholarship program is pretty popular, and in fact, we may actually have some past recipients here today. We certainly have some of our volunteers in the room as well. I would like to share with you that we currently manage over 125 scholarship funds, and it includes four-year scholarships, community college scholarships, and individual scholarship funds as well. And last year alone, we awarded $1.45 million in meaningful awards to over 625 students in the 29 towns that we serve. Our foundation staff provides, we think, high-level service both to our students and to our donors. I know both Sarah Carlson and Rachel Salyers are working and walking around here. They are part of our extensive team, and I just personally want to thank them so much for all that they do for the program. All that we do includes handling advertising of the scholarships that have been brought here to the foundation, communication with everyone involved in the process, from guidance counselors to teachers to parents and students alike, student selection, award distribution, and actually renewal applications for those that apply. To better serve our community students and parents in schools, we offer an online scholarship directory, which will launch, we usually say, on or about October 15th. And it's great because that coincides with the launch of the free application for federal student aid, which will launch by the government on the 1st. And also new this year will include an app for students to be able to do that process online. So we encourage you to share the link, which is included in your packet, which is pretty easy to remember. It's www.hfpgscholarships.org. And we want you to share it with as many students as you can and encourage them to also check back weekly, because we always get new donors and new organizations that like to advertise their scholarships on our directory. We think it's also a very hands-on application process for our students, so we're really grateful to all the school counselors and teachers and other folks in the education sphere who deal with students about getting the word out about the scholarship and also the program. This year alone, we had 36 trained volunteers who helped support the foundation with their time by reading applications or also going to different schools to interview some of the students for the scholarships that do require that component and helping us to make very difficult decisions. So you may also be wondering how you could start a fund here at the foundation. And let me emphasize that anyone could start a fund. Our latest donor actually was a former recipient of a scholarship here at the foundation well over 20 years ago and wanted to give back to the community that helped to raise him and to support him. We actually featured him this year at our scholarship reception, and it was really awesome to see that come full circle. Funds are also often set up as memorials, honoring those who have passed away, and we can also work with you to set up a future fund via bequest. With a gift of $50,000, you could create an individual scholarship fund and name specific selection criteria for your scholar. And the foundation can help you decide and participate in reviewing or nominating potential recipients of the award. With this type of fund, you can support graduating high school seniors, students who are currently enrolled in college, or you could even help support a graduate student as well. We handle the distributions and the renewal applications and can help you communicate with your scholar as well. You could also contribute any amount to the foundation's general scholarship endowment fund with a gift of $10,000 or more. We commonly refer to that as the 4-year pool, and those contributions are invested broadly in a pretty diverse portfolio, and the fund makes a 4-year scholarship award at $3,000, and it's renewable over the course of the 4 years that a student is in school. You could also contribute any amount to our community college scholarship endowment fund or create a named fund within that program as well with a gift of $10,000 or more. And those contributions are also invested broadly in our portfolio, and they make 3-year awards. And they're staggered based on the cost of the awards. That pool of money for scholarships is available for graduating high school seniors, and a few years ago we also opened it up to adult learners who are entering or who are currently attending a community college within Greater Hartford. So that's a little bit about the foundation, but let's get to the main show, the reason you are all here today, our featured panelist. Included in your material is a little bio about each one of them. I'm just going to share some highlights. We have with us today Dr. Joanne Berger-Sweeney, who became the 22nd president of Trinity College in July of 2014. She is the first woman and the first African American to lead the college. She came to Trinity from Tufts. She is a neuroscientist by training, and she also serves on the board of the Connecticut Conference of Independent Colleges and the Hartford Consortium for Higher Ed. We are so glad to have you here today. Also joining us is Dr. Tanya Millner-Harlee. She is the interim chief executive officer at Manchester Community College. She began her tenure just a few short months ago on June 15th. She is the 6th leader of the college since its founding in 1963 and the first African American in that role, and is also the first to hold the title of chief executive officer. She earned her doctorate in higher ed administration from the George Washington University, and she has held several positions in higher ed, and we're so glad to have you as well. And while we await Dr. Toro, I will share with you that last year she became the 13th president of Central Connecticut State University. It's the oldest public supported institution of higher ed in Connecticut. She is also the first female and the first Latina president in Central's history. And we're going to be excited to welcome her. So let's get started with some questions for the panelist. And let me get my list here, which I just realized I stashed somewhere else. Okay. And where did that go? So yes, I'm going to do that while I look for that. So one of the things that we're very interested in learning about from both of you is the value of education and why it's so important. When we think about the context of the question on the table of ensuring college access through scholarships, let's talk about why college and higher ed is even important. We'll start with you, Dr. Berger-Sweeney.
So thank you for that kind introduction. And I'm going to make kind of 2 parallel points. I think many people are focused right now on higher education and what it does for the individual who is educated. We know that it improves social mobility, it improves long-term income, but it also improves factors that are a little bit more amorphous, like happiness, if you have a college education. And I think many of us are focused on the values of higher education for the individual that goes through. However, I don't want us to forget the importance of higher education for society in general. Higher education is nonprofit because it's a public value. It is of interest to the public. The basis of a democracy is an educated citizenship that can make choices when they vote or participate in the governing of the country. I think that recently we've seen some of the problems when the citizenship as a whole is not educated and doesn't understand the difference between facts and not facts. So, what I want to emphasize is the importance of higher education for the personal good. I certainly don't deny that, but also for the public good.
I'm going to say ditto. I'm taking everything I thought about. We're in this business, of course, educators, not necessarily to get rich, and many of you know that if you live with a teacher or an education administrator. We're here because we know we're public servants. And just as Dr. Berger-Sweeney says, we're here for the greater good of society. We know many of our students, depending on what paths they follow, if they also go into social work, allied health, manufacturing, these kinds of areas, they'll have great jobs. However, they may not be millionaires either unless they, create some app or, some other innovative program that no one has thought of just yet. So we think about the importance of higher education in terms of our values for society, not just the personal good, personal enrichments, of course, financial gain. We've seen those graphs that, go from high school diploma all the way to doctorate. And even those average salaries are nowhere near, $1 million CEO salaries. Those are, you go from maybe 30 grand to 75 grand. So for many of us, we get into this field simply because we believe in those forefathers' goals. You think of Thomas Jefferson. Why do you create public education? Because we want an educated citizenry. We want folks to be able to vote. We want people to be able to read. We want them to read well. We want them to comprehend the ideas and ideology of the time, not necessarily because we want them to think just like us. We simply want them to think. Coming from the faculty, we focus at MCC, most like other colleges and universities, on enhancing critical thinking skills, enhancing decision-making processes, and things of that nature, so that society moves better. We work well together. When students go into the workforce, we want to ensure that they have open minds, right? That they're able to accept differences and be not only tolerant of them, but celebratory of them. And also to be able to find similarities between themselves and people who don't look like them, people who don't act like them, people who aren't from the same backgrounds, and to know that you can be equitable. You can think in those types of terms instead of being narrow and closed-minded and provincial, thinking, oh, I can't possibly learn anything from that person on my team, or even I don't want that person on my team. That doesn't help your workforce if you have closed-minded individuals who refuse to participate in a grand project or to move your vision forward. So we're here not necessarily to put more money in people's pockets. We would love that. We really would, particularly at the community college when we see students who are at the lower income brackets to begin with. We want that to be just a little bit of the reward, but the greater reward is full participation in society. So that's why we think higher ed is very important to all of our students.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm hoping that you could give us just a little brief synopsis on your college's scholarship program. Could you tell us a little bit about whether many of your awards are merit-based or need or both, and about how many students are served?
MCC, they're both. I don't know if this is on, and I don't want to
think it
yell
is.
at you
Yeah, no,
guys.
you can
It's
pull it
something- can
forward.
you-
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Let's
There
see,
you
is
go.
that helpful? It
Yeah,
doesn't
maybe
sound like
tilt
it
it a
to
little
me,
bit. Yeah.
so maybe, okay, maybe it's
Good.
helpful to you. We have both. We have scholarships based on financial need. As I said, most of our students come in lower income brackets. We also have scholarships that are awarded for merit. Many folks, unfortunately, think students who come to the community college come as a last resort. You didn't get accepted anywhere else. You're not as bright as your four-year counterparts. That's not true. So we have students who achieve similar scores on the SATs, who come in from high school with 4.0s. They just don't have the access to the finances that many of their other counterparts have when they attend institutions that are $50,000-$60,000 a year. So even with that, I was speaking to a gentleman earlier regarding affordability. Our motto at community colleges: access, affordability. Affordability is relative. So community colleges have been late to the game of fundraising. So we've got a lot of catching up. You think of Harvard University started this in 16 whatever, and they've got billions and billions of dollars. Our foundation has a few million. So we're only 50 years into the game versus 400 some odd years into the game. So for us, affordability is relative. $500, $159 a credit. It may sound, oh yeah, that's easy for you to do, but when you're deciding between paying rent, getting groceries that week, daycare for a child, then $500 becomes very difficult. So we award hundreds of students scholarships every semester. Many of our students get full Pell. So those students kind of take themselves out of the scholarship application process, which is also unfortunate because we do have thousands and thousands of dollars to give away. So if you know MCC students, encourage them to apply even if they do get full Pell, because that will be helpful with maintaining a certain lifestyle, books, gas money for car, to get back and forth. Our program, as I said, has been in existence for about 50 years. We awarded last year $320,000 worth of scholarships. We average about somewhere between $250 and $350 each year. So we're robust, but we still have more we can give to students, and we'd like to continue that relationship with our donors. We don't want you to think, oh, we're just fine. Our kids are great. They're all getting Pell Grants, so don't give us anything. Our merit scholarships are usually based on students achieving 3.0 or higher, whether they're coming from high school or if they've already had a semester somewhere else. The largest scholarship we have for high school graduates right now is called the High School Graduate Scholarship, and that one is students are required to have a 2.5 when they graduate, and that scholarship will be $1,500 a semester. And most of our scholarships range from anywhere $250 to about $1,500 per semester.
What's the cost?
The cost for a semester is about $1,500, if you take a full load.
Okay, so we represent, not surprisingly, kind of opposite ends of the
Yes.
spectrum
Yes.
in terms of cost. So Trinity College is a small, selective liberal arts college with a comprehensive fee of a bit more than $70,000. The majority of people cannot afford to pay that, and we recognize that. So let me share with you a couple of statistics. First of all, your question was, and it is the terminology, do you have merit or need-based scholarships. So the first thing that I'm going to say is all of the scholarships that we give out are merit, because everyone's meritorious who receives one of them. Some are based on financial need, and others are not. At Trinity College, the vast majority of our scholarships are for people who need it financially, because when you have a price tag of $70,000 for a comprehensive fee, most people are going to require some kind of aid. Annually, we give out about $55 million in aid. That is approximately 1/3 of our operating budget. We give out for financial aid at the institution. The other thing I want to share with you is, of that $55 million, approximately 3% comes from the federal government, approximately 0.3% comes from the Connecticut government, which means the remainder of that is provided by the institution. And it's a combination of our endowed funds. We are fortunate to have about $620 million in endowment, which sounds incredible until you compare us to Williams College that has $2 billion in their endowment for approximately the same size students. But the vast majority of our endowment is coming out to support scholarships. And so we have all merit-based scholarships. The vast majority are based on financial need, but we do have two programs, one called the Presidential Scholars Program, in which people get full tuition, room and board, and that is regardless of the ability of the family to pay. That's kind of our top tier. And then we have something called 1823 Scholars, because Trinity was founded in 1823, almost 200 years old. And those are between 10 and 20,000 and 25,000 against our tuition. So that just gives you a little bit of a sense.
Great, thank you so much. With that in mind, could you tell us a little bit about any formal application process you have for those scholarships, and if it's different at the time frame of when a student is entering as a graduating high school senior or a student is currently enrolled? Maybe we'll start with you, Tanya.
Oh, you want to start with
yeah,
me?
sure.
We'll
We'll
yes,
flip-flop.
okay. We'll try to do that, to be fair. Yes, it's a formal application process, and the deadlines differ for high school graduates versus students who are already at the institution. For high school graduates, of course, everything has to be done by May in order for them to be ready for the fall. The students who are already at MCC, we have rolling deadlines. So one is coming up, I believe, October 18th, and then another is November. We try to give students 2 times to apply during the semester because it's tough to remind them to, get into the online applications. Many of our faculty will give students classroom time in order to fill out the applications or to complete. When we first moved to online, maybe 4 years ago, we found that students would start the application and then never go back to finish it. So, part of trying to rectify that was to ask faculty, could you give them 10 or 15 minutes during class time to get in there and to find out what the glitch is, what the holdup may be. And it was simply, they get distracted by one of their other many competing interests and would never get back into the system. Almost all of our students fill out the FAFSA, so that's where we start. And we create our institutional aid, firstly based on that financial need, and then we go from there.
Okay. And the answer is yes. We also use the same form, FAFSA, and someone had to write it out for me. It's Free Application for Federal Student Aid. So it's a, federal form that people fill out who want financial aid at Trinity College. And then we have some other supplemental forms, and then you do have to turn in your tax reforms. And let me explain how it works. Trinity College is very fortunate. As I've said, we have a good, healthy endowment. Doesn't mean we are rich and flush with money, but we have a good, healthy endowment. And what we are able to do is if a student is accepted at Trinity College, we guarantee that we will meet the full financial need of the student. So it doesn't mean everyone can be accepted, but once you're accepted, you fill out those forms, and our guarantee to the student is that we will fulfill the federal level of financial need. And those are determined to some degree outside of our doors. So we make that guarantee to the student, and we make that guarantee for 4 years. So if the financial circumstance of the family changes up or down, we guarantee that 4 years in college. And that is really a just tremendous opportunity that we're able to give our students. The next thing I will tell you is that we instituted a new program at Trinity where for people in the lower income brackets with family incomes of $60,000 or less, we allow them to apply once for financial aid, and we guarantee it for 4 years so that they don't have to fill out the form every year. The reason that our financial aid officer suggested that we do it is looking at past data. We saw that in the lowest income bracket, it was rare that there was much change in the financial aid. So, kind of why make people go through the process for 4 years? And the second thing that he said was when you fill out these forms, it's kind of implicitly reminding you you're poor.
Right.
And why do you have to keep doing that to someone whose
Excellent.
finances are not likely to change? Now, of course, the student needs to be in good standing during those times, but that's what we are able to offer our students. Just to provide one additional contrast, there are institutions, probably only about 25 in the country, that are oh gosh, the name just went out of my head, but actually people are admitted regardless of their ability to pay. So that is not a need blind. Thank you. I said need blind, and then it went out of my head, so I think, okay, it's like before 8:30 in the morning. And I'm not sure I've had enough coffee. But we are not a need blind institution. There are about 25 of those in the country, all the Ivy Leagues, and a number of liberal arts colleges, in which their admissions process is blind to the ability to pay. I would say at Trinity, about 90% of our students are admitted blind to their ability to pay. But then at the very end of the pool, we do have to take into consideration whether there's an ability to pay or not, because we're guaranteeing that if we admit them, we are going to provide them with the financial aid needed for the 4 years.
Excellent. So could you talk a little bit about, I think you've answered the question of whether or not your scholarships are for first-year students or for all 4 years. But is there a special formula internally that you all use for determining need?
We use the federal formula to determine
Same as well.
need. And, it's interesting because, families do call us and say that's just not enough, or you haven't taken certain things into consideration. And we have a little bit of leeway, but not that much. We really, think the fairest thing is to depend on the federal formulas.
The same with us. And believe it or not, we get those same calls where I recently fielded an email from a parent saying circumstances had changed in the family. One of the parents had been hurt and was no longer at work. Could we consider that? Fortunately, at most of our institutions, I'm assuming yours is similar, the executive level, the presidents can make that call and possibly waive a fee, waive part of the tuition outside of the regular scholarship application process. But all of that is dependent on the FAFSA. When they come up with that EIC, the estimated
family contribution.
EFC,
Right.
thank you. And we base our determination on those same factors.
That is why it's so important that we encourage as many students as possible to complete the FAFSA, which again opens on October 1st. Yes, you are correct. The estimated family contribution number is so important, and one of the things that I think is important is looking at it state by state, and here internally, when we're looking at need, usually, if the number hovers anywhere between about $30,000 to $35,000 or under, the family is considered to be of financial need. Obviously, if someone has a need of zero, that's dire straits.
Right.
But in order to be able to look at that number for low income and also middle income numbers, that's about the average.
Right.
So thank you
And
so much
being
for
a
that.
parent of a child who's in college, that EFC is always
Yeah.
wrong. You think I can pay this? I've got
Exactly.
other kids. I've got a house. I've got so I can imagine what other parents go through when they see that, when you get that formula back to you and you think, oh my goodness. So what do I have to sell in order to make that contribution?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So could you talk a little bit about this phenomena of supplanting outside scholarships? If a student gets an outside scholarship, how you handle that?
Yes, we do. We adjust our institutional aid based on whatever it is that they get. Let's say Hartford Foundation gives a student $500. In addition to what we've already offered, we will adjust and sort of pull back our $500 to make the fit.
Right. And also, since we're guaranteeing that we're meeting the full need of the family, supplant, it depends on how much it is, because we know there are additional expenses beyond the comprehensive fee. So many of them are looked at on an individual basis, but generally we guarantee support for the full financial need for the family. And it means if one person gets a fellowship, the money just goes to someone else. And believe it or not, it never, ever goes into my pocket.
Could you talk a little bit about encouraging prospective students or admitted students to seek other private scholarships like at the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving?
So, I'm sorry, repeat your question?
Do you encourage prospective students, those who are applying?
Oh, most definitely. In our student services area, those are our folks who go out to the high schools and meet with counselors in our service area. Fortunately, we have great financial aid officers who are quite articulate, probably much more so than I am, on all of the details regarding state scholarships, regarding foundational scholarships. And so they share that information with students and guidance counselors, because for us, access is most important. So if a student comes already with a package, package for $3,000, we're not going to say, well, hey, you're too good for us, go somewhere else. Or we're not going to say, we'll take away any of the aid that we've offered. We may displace some of that aid by saying, okay, you already have, $2,500, so we'll give you $500, and then that extra $2,500 we save can go to another student who was, fifth on the list while you were first. So we constantly encourage students to look for other opportunities. Unfortunately, we can't serve everybody at all times in all places. So it's best for them to apply as often as they can.
Right. And we also encourage people to apply for outside scholarships because there's actually a value on their resumes when they have sought and received outside funding.
Excellent. We're very glad that at the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, when we obviously send the scholarship checks for our students, that the supplanting piece is not part of that equation, and we thank you so much for that. Let's talk a little bit about college cost, access, and scholarships in another perspective. The increasing cost of college and the implications that this has on, I call it the S and the D word, student debt,
Yeah.
directly impacting access for a lot of students. Could you talk a little bit about what that looks like at each of your institutions?
Right. Well, I can start. Yes. Generally, our packages include some amount of student loan. Our student loans are significantly below the national average. And I would say that a student who comes through with full aid will generally come out with debt of less than the debt for a car by the end of their 4 years. So they are less than $25,000 in debt. When you hear the news referring to people with significant student debts, two things about that. Generally, it is a for-profit institution. Their debt is 2 to 3 times higher than a nonprofit institution. And the second thing that is most challenging are people who take out debt and do not finish their degree because they do not have the increased income and ability to pay that debt back. But for our students, as I said, the debt that they come out with after 4 years is generally less than a car loan would be for the students. And we consider the money that people take out in loan their own investment in their future, and that people need to have something at stake themselves when they're thinking about the value of a higher education. There are many studies that suggest if you have put and contributed something of your own to the pot, that you value it more. So for those reasons, we actually do have a loan program, but we understand the problems with people who have incomes less than $60,000, and very often those loans are waived. But for more middle-class students, they will come out with some debt, but as I've said, significantly less than the national average.
Similar to what Dr. Berger-Sweeney is saying here, we try to eliminate as much of that student debt as possible. As I've mentioned before, most of our students come in on the lower income bracket, so we do all we can to create packages that don't add to that burden after they complete, whether it's a certificate or an associate or move on to transferring or directly into the workforce. We want them to be as liquid as possible in order to move up in the income bracket. So for the most part, our students do not leave with a high debt just because of costs and the way we can create packages Fortunately, 3,000 is a little bit better than 70, so we can package that a bit better than. But again, as I said earlier, cost affordability is relative. So to some, $3,000 in college loan debt is just as dangerous as $25,000. It could mean the difference between having a home and not having a home, or being, food insecure versus being food secure. So in those attempts, we try to create packages that don't have loans at all, if we can.
Could you talk a little bit about the benefits and also the challenges for colleges when it comes to offering scholarships?
Some of the challenges include access to information, believe it or not. We'll put on our electronic billboards when the deadlines are, when the applications are available, how to go online, where to go, and students will somehow walk past that because they're focused on something else. We'll have faculty introduce the information in classes. We send out email blasts, and we have anywhere from 6,100 to 7,000 students a semester, and maybe 1,000 will apply. Maybe 600 will complete the application. So we, keep wondering, where is that gap there? So for us, that's probably challenge number one, ensuring that the students actually apply for the money when we have it available for them. The second challenge, of course, is getting the money, right, to match the students' needs. We were fortunate at MCC, the D'Amato family, when their patriarch of the family passed away, a great deal of his estate went to us. So we went from having a foundation that had maybe $1 million to $2 million to now being a foundation that has $14 million from that one gift. And it's a gift that keeps giving, because every time somebody sells some property in the family, part of that comes right back to us. So we have a huge, well, for us, to go from 1 to 2 million to 14 million, we've been wildly successful, and we have a huge nest egg that we want to share with our students. So with that becomes another challenge. Okay, let's get a group of faculty, staff, community members, and foundation members to sit together to determine how we distribute this money. How do we get this to the students? How do we get this money to the faculty and staff who need it for upgrades for software that we don't want to pass on to the students, right? How do we offset those tuition hikes, right? When the state says we can't give you any more money, or we can give you less money, that means now we have to take on technology upgrades ourselves. Now we have to take on building renovations ourselves right out of our operating budget. So our foundation is currently meeting probably this morning, and I can't be there, this morning, to determine whether or not we're going to, the foundation is going to take on some of those costs in addition to scholarships. So it's not just scholarships, it's also maintaining the facilities. Community colleges, like other colleges, are facility intensive, and we're losing the out on the bonding funds and state funds that we had relied on for the past few decades to meet that need. So our foundation now is saying, okay, we're a little bit safer than we were 5 years ago. Maybe we can meet students' needs in those ways as well. So those costs are not then charged to students. So that's our 3 big challenges.
Wonderful.
Right. I would say our challenge is making it all work financially. When you talk about giving away $55 million in grants every year, how do you support that? Some of it, and a significant portion, is based on endowment. but a significant portion is not. And so our students apply for financial aid. That isn't the issue for us. It's having sufficient financial aid to meet the needs of students when your costs continue to go up and when federal and state support do not.
Could you talk a little bit about the benefits to donors if they provide scholarship support or programming support to your institutions and what that looks like a little bit?
Well, I think it must feel really good. And fundamentally, just to share with you that I actually make donations to Trinity College myself. And it's because I believe so deeply in higher education. I want to make sure that I continue to support people both at Trinity College and also my undergraduate alma mater. So I guess I can tell you from personal experience that it feels good. It feels as though I'm making a contribution to society. I myself was a financial aid student, and it feels as though I'm able to now pay forward to someone else. If you think about it, and think about the talent pool in the United States and the world, you recognize that it's not based on socioeconomic status.
Right.
There are smart people who are poor, medium income, and higher income.
Right.
What does it mean that we say only to the wealthy people that you're worthy of education? We are removing an unbelievable percentage of the talent pool, and we can't afford to waste talent. So I think it feels great.
The personal legacy that you can create, whether you're donating $20 here or $20,000 or $20 million, feels fabulous. I am in the same situation. I donate to MCC. They take it right out of my check every 2 weeks. We have a robust representation in our faculty and staff. Everyone on the cabinet level donates. They have that same situation where it's taken right out of their check, and I never ask how much people donate. I am just fortunate, and I feel blessed when they do, and many of my colleagues feel the same. I was fortunate to meet one of the members of the D'Amato family that I referenced earlier at our annual fundraising gala. It's called the Evening of Fine Wines, and it is the fourth Friday of April every year, so mark it on your calendar right now. And she talked about the legacy that her grandfather left, and the name of the scholarship, and their name is now on our library as well. So we have those naming opportunities of buildings, classroom labs, bricks in our path in the courtyard, and that's the feel-good piece of donating. Also the recognition. Some people enjoy the public recognition of seeing their name in one of our guidebooks, or seeing their name on a building. I think that's probably a small percentage of people who just want that. Also, the pay it forward. Many of us, who grew up in the 80s are scholarship recipients or financial aid recipients. I, was born and raised in Hartford. There's no way in the world my parents would have been able to pay for Georgetown University when I went. So I was fortunate someone else left a legacy that allowed me to attend. So I give a little to Georgetown, I give a little to MCC, whatever I can afford. And now I'm giving a little or a lot to Temple University, so where my son is, and there's that. But, that's kind of forced. But hopes that he will, when he graduates, he'll go on and continue that legacy of giving. But, of course, there's the societal benefit that we all enjoy. So to feel that you're a part of that, that you are providing talent for the workforce, you're providing more critical thinkers to society, folks who will work on true equity, true peace, true kindness in the world because they were given an opportunity they may not have had if Dr. Berger-Sweeney had not given them this money or had not willed this money from the D'Amato family. That also creates sort of this circle of giving where people, okay, I was given an opportunity, let me pull somebody else up into this circle. So, donors should think of it in that way, not just the public recognition, but the access you're creating to society for somebody who may not have had that access, but also the world you're creating for yourself and your family for generations when you allow others to be educated.
Right. I wanted to add one more piece, and that is when I went to college a number of years ago, generally you just heard that you had financial aid. It's a little bit more typical now that if someone has a scholarship named after someone, they actually know about that, that the student takes the time and writes a letter or has an opportunity to meet with members of the family that have provided the donation. And I actually think there's something quite beautiful about that. One, for the student, they recognize that some individual is responsible for helping them. And what we have seen happen is that many of our donors want to contribute more than the money that the scholarship is allowed. They want to help connect those students to jobs. They want to share their advice with the students. And once again, I think that's a beautiful thing outside of the financial support. Sometimes you're also able to provide encouragement and support for a student when they need it.
That's
So
great.
that just once again feels great.
That's wonderful, because that's actually my last question. How can donors, especially those here in the room, get involved in supporting higher ed just beyond funding a scholarship? So I think you touched on a little bit of that, but if you have other ideas,
Exactly.
we'd love to hear them.
Yes, I do. I'm going to start with
have a list
one
of things.
exactly right now that I think is critically important, and that is to understand the value of higher education and to share that with government officials. Right now, it's as though higher education is a bad thing. I mean, I cannot believe that educating people for life is a bad thing. But it's hardly a day that I pick up a newspaper without reading something negative about higher education, the value, the cost. It doesn't matter. So I think as much as financial resources help, so does your support in the value of higher education, both for the individual and, as I've said, for the society in general.
Right. I'd add to that the possibility of mentoring students as well, to have a connection to the student that you've given the scholarship to. One of our students was hurt in connection with his military service, and we have a veterans oasis on campus where veterans and active duty students can go and relax and talk to counselors. We have a donor who was also hurt in Vietnam during his service, who comes in and he talks to these students, and he tells them about what he went through. He talks to them about, how it moved from shell shock to now PTSD, things that, many of us take for granted or we don't think about. So creating those kinds of relationships with students are just as important as offering them financial help. Also with mentoring, there comes the connections to the workforce. Is your company hiring? Do you have a colleague who's looking for an assistant or an intern, an externship? That way students get in the workforce pipeline as soon as possible, and they've already worked with you, spoken with you, so they know the behaviors of the workforce, because we can, most of our faculty can only provide the critical thinking skills, the writing skills, the reading comprehension skills, and we're not necessarily with our feet in the door all the time of the values of the workforce and what's necessary in day-to-day operations. So we look to people like you in the community who are already there and can share those types of tidbits with students, and they might not get it anywhere else, right? We frequently talk about what students can or cannot do. We hear from my advisory board members, okay, well, students can't do this when they get to the workforce. What are you guys doing? And a lot of it is what we've termed at MCC ABT. They just ain't been told. So we need you guys to help tell them what they will be expected of them after they complete their certificate or after they complete their associate and beyond. Once they enter the doors of your companies and corporations, to say, you probably shouldn't wear a yellow suit. Those kind of, maybe it should be dark and pinstripe. But if you don't know, if you're coming from a place where you were not in that family of workers, you weren't in that professional class, you may not think in those terms. And we often think, why don't you know that? Well, you ain't been told. So those types of relationships we value as well. In addition to my other requests for help with our facility intensive issues, where we move beyond the scholarships for students, and then the help with the classroom needs, because our students need the software and hardware and books and things of that nature to be up to date, so that they can compete with their counterparts globally. They need to have access to those types of materials as well. So.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We have learned so much about both of your institutions and your ability to ensure college access through scholarships. Now I actually have, this is not on the agenda, I have a question for the audience. How many of you have actually benefited from a scholarship, whether it's here at the Hartford Foundation or at your institution? Just a show of hands. More than half the room. I think that's absolutely wonderful. So now we'd like to open it up to questions from the audience. And we have Wanda available with a microphone. So if you could please just stand and state your name and your question, that would be wonderful.
Hello.
So everyone can see you.
Hello, I'm Hyacinth Yenny.
Hello.
I live in Hartford. And I want to thank Trinity College, not because you're here, because this happened before you came. I want to thank Trinity College and the Hartford Foundation, because two of my children went to Trinity College, and
Very nice.
they have become productive citizens. They have become doctors, medical and PhD doctors.
Very nice.
And I could not have paid for it. So I'm indebted to Trinity College. And the foundation, we have a great relationship, because over the years they've been helping, not only me, but a lot of other parents that could not afford that college tuition. So I'm here to cheer you on for you all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Sweet.
Hyacinth.
Good morning, Trevor Buford. Could you talk a little bit about your direct relationship with Hartford Public Schools, and maybe some unique opportunities you have for students who actually come up in the Hartford city directly?
I'll start with, we have a middle college, which is sort of a laboratory prep high school, and the students there, it's called Great Path Academy. The students there in junior and senior year can take classes with the college students, and with the possibility of earning a diploma, high school diploma, and an associate degree by the end of their senior year. That is managed by Hartford Public Schools, so we have a very close relationship. We meet with them at least once a week. They're the principal. There's a student representative on my presidential advisory council. So we hear what the high school students' needs are. Many of them go beyond the financial realm, as you can imagine. Many of their needs are social, workforce related. Some of them have caused us to create a food pantry on campus, a career clothing closet on campus. So we get that kind of feedback from our high school students in addition to our college students. And we have recently increased our student population. Although we're in Manchester, we have I want to say at least 25 to 30% of our students come from the Hartford area who are taking our classes, although that's outside of our service area of town. So we have a close relationship with Leslie, the superintendent, because of GPA, of course, and because of our great influx of students from the Hartford area. And we offer the brother-to-brother program, the sister-to-sister program, and that's largely populated with students from Hartford and East Hartford. These are lower-income students who request a mentor, largely from their own background, being African American, African Caribbean, Latino, and Latina. So we have those kinds of services for greater retention already built in to our student services programs.
So there's quite a long list of things that Trinity College does related to the local environment. The Hartford Youth Foundation, there are a number of things we're involved in. I thought I'd share a little bit about HMTCA, the Hartford Magnet Trinity College Academy. Mm-hmm. So we've actually lent our name to a high school, the Magnet School that's across the street. And some of the relationship there is that Trinity College faculty help with curriculum at the high school. Some of our faculty members go and teach individual courses. The Magnet students come to Trinity College and are able to take classes there for free during their high school years if they're if they are at an appropriate level to take a college class. During the summer, the students from the Magnet School actually do intensive summer programs. One in the 9th grade students do it in English, and the 10th grade students do it in science and math. Once again, our faculty members and our students participate on those summer intensive programs on our campus, as well as our students going and volunteering in the Magnet School. So that's just one example of a very rich program and a very strong relationship that we have with a high school that's across the street.
George Slate, when you make donations to the institutions that you lead or to institutions you attended, can all of it be spent currently, or do you restrict it to endowments? And then as leaders of your organization, what kind of balance do you look for in terms of being able to spend currently versus building the endowment?
Right. So the money that I donate, I've decided is all current use, and it is because that is a declining source of money for institutions.
Right.
It allows the most flexibility, and it helps in the immediate term. And almost every institution that I know has immediate needs. I am thinking now about some longer term uses and endowment, but for the most part, I'm giving to the category that fewer and fewer people are giving to, which is current use, unrestricted current use.
The same at my school, and because we've just recently gotten a huge gift, we're looking at things like endowment. Before we did not. Everything was for current use.
Right. But interestingly, we are soon going to be engaging in a capital campaign at Trinity in which what we are focusing on is endowment money, because that is the money that will keep Trinity College going for the next 200 years. So both are important.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm Maggie Willard. Thanks, Jennifer and team, for putting this together. We often hear that students these days do not follow a traditional college path of finishing in 4 years or 2 years. So what percentage of the students at your institutions actually complete their degrees in 4 years or 2 years, respectively? And what does the effect of going part-time or stopping out and coming back have on their financial aid?
That's a great question. Do you
Okay.
want to start?
I'll start. Nationally, community colleges are measured whether they finish the associate in 3 years, right, the 150% time. And I believe that number hovers somewhere between 38 and 40%. So it's not that high. And for the reasons you gave, stop outs, financial crises, changes in family structure, most of these are outside of cognitive ability. I mentioned earlier competing interests. Do you pay rent this month, or do you take an extra class this semester? MCC, we are at the highest graduation rates in the state. Unfortunately, that's still about 22%. We have 27% transfer out to other institutions, largely four-year schools, so that makes us look a little bit better, but we're still, worried about the other 20 to 30% we can't account for. And a lot of that is, we're moving on better retention, better persistence, and like I said, a great deal of that is not cognitive ability. It's just the transient nature, unfortunately, of community college, where students move in, move out, stream out, job changes, life changes, and they move out and then move back in. So we're trying to, I have a great institutional researcher who's looking at those types of issues and doing exit interviews with the students he can find to determine what the reasons were. Financial aid usually comes into play if a student stops out by failing, right? And they go on to academic probation, or they look as though they're not making academic progress. Then the institution and the federal government says, okay, hold on, we want to put you on probation, see how you do this first semester back. If you don't do as well, we will eventually cut off your access to funds. We have students who come in right after high school many times, and because everybody's like, oh, you got to go to college, which you should be telling your children, but they're just not mature enough, they're not developed enough, they're not ready personally, and so they'll end up leaving without withdrawing, which then puts F's on their transcript, and then they'll come back 5 years later and realize, okay, I need a certificate, a credential in order to get a promotion at the job I'm in, or I want a better job, or I want greater opportunities, and then they'll have to reapply for institutional and federal aid. And many times we're able to meet that need once or twice, but after the third time or the fourth time, the institution and the federal government will start saying no. So it will eventually affect the financial aid.
Right. And we're in a different situation at Trinity. If you look at 6-year graduation rates, they're in excess of 85%. Yes. So most of our students go through the 4 years and graduate, the vast majority, and we are much higher than the national average. Nevertheless, we continue to try and increase retention of our students. Now, as long as a student is in good standing, they are able to receive their financial aid. If they take a break and go away and come back, the likelihood that they will retain their financial aid is very, very high. We want our students to come back and finish and graduate. In addition, we have a specialized program called the Individualized Degree Program, or IDP program, and that's for non-traditional age students who come back and can take course by course at a time, depending on their schedule, and they pay for courses individually. We do have financial aid associated with that IDP program. So we have a number of non-traditional age students on campus who are receiving financial aid for the IDP program, if that gives you an idea.
Good morning. I'm Melissa Paul from Hartford Promise. We are a college scholarship and success organization here in Hartford. And we had a couple of questions about your financial aid processes at both of your institutions. The first question is in regards to how you determine a student's need. And like you said, it was based on
FAFSA.
the EFC from the FAFSA. We know a lot of other institutions are also using the CSS profile.
Yes.
So I wanted to know if that was something that you would ever consider. And
We do,
okay.
yes.
Do you want me
We
to-
do not
okay.
yet.
Our second question had to do with sort of the supplanting of the financial aid based on other scholarships and grants that the students might be receiving. Our scholarship is a last dollar scholarship. So we're always curious as to how institutions, or I guess when institutions sort of make that decision on when to assess other aid, because our scholarship isn't applied until the very end. So if you could tell us a little bit more about that process, that'd be great.
Depending on what you mean by the very end, is that a certain date or a specific? It depends when the student comes for his or her refund. My son, as a matter of fact, gets a scholarship from the Marine Corps, and that one is assessed at the end. So sometimes it does not displace the institutional aid. So it's similar with us. If it comes in after our census date, the student then just has money left in his or her account, and they can withdraw that money and use it for personal needs or use it for additional books or items that they need during this semester. So that money wouldn't be taken from any aid that semester or the following semester.
Morning.
Good
Henry
morning.
Link from Hartford, and I also live near Trinity College. It's where I grew up. I didn't go there, though. I just took one course.
Hope it was a good course.
Yeah. Anyway, I just was wondering, Dr. Berger-Sweeney, if you could tell a little bit about what your new presence in downtown Hartford is and what they're doing.
Yes. So you asked about the new presence in downtown Hartford. We have 2 spaces in downtown Hartford. One is at 10 Constitution Plaza. One is across the plaza at 1 Constitution Plaza. In 10 Constitution Plaza, we have launched an initiative called the Liberal Arts Action Lab. That is a laboratory which is a joint venture between Trinity College and Capital Community College. Our students and faculty members partner with people in the neighborhood who have particular needs that student consultants and faculty can help with. So usually the lab will take on, for example, 6 projects during a semester, and different organizations will apply to the college to have their particular need filled. Some of them last year were about health disparities in Hartford. Another was about creating a sense of place around the Mark Twain Center. So different kinds of projects are submitted, and then faculty members and students are able to apply also to the Action Lab, and we pair together projects and faculty members and students who work on them for a semester. So the Liberal Arts Action Lab, and the reason we call it a Liberal Arts Action Lab is so that people understand that you can use the liberal arts in service of society and turn your academic knowledge into practical skills by the time that you leave, as well as support the community. So that's going on at 10 Constitution Plaza. We just announced last week at 1 Constitution Plaza, we are engaging in a partnership with Infosys, the Indian tech company, who will be creating a hub in Hartford. And we will be providing for Infosys some bridge programs in which liberal arts students are going to be educated with technical skills to go into jobs in technology, for example, at Infosys. We are combining that space with the Med Tech Accelerator that Hartford Healthcare is helping to finance and support, along with Trinity and the University of Connecticut. So I would say, if I generalized how the space is being used, I would say, 1, it's for interesting and unique partnerships. 2, it's leveraging the fact that we're a liberal arts college in a capital city, and kind of leveraging our ability to be both liberal arts but very experientially based in a small capital city. Does that give you a sense?
Good morning. My name is Josh Herlock, and I have a couple of questions. Number 1, in your opinion, what onus do you feel is on colleges to keep costs reasonable? Because let's be honest, scholarships are great, but as the college costs at nearly every institution rise every year, that increases the affordability gap for families. Right. My second question is, are you also aware of alternative sources or avenues for college access, such as CHESLA, which is the state of Connecticut's college loan program, and it actually has a lower fixed rate currently than the federal loans?
So I will start with the first question about cost. Yes, costs are increasing in higher education. However, I will tell you my commitment to making Trinity College more affordable is seen in the fact that our operating budget has actually decreased over the years that I've been there. So we have been successful at least leveling off and actually decreasing our operating cost, and that's real, and that's in real dollars when salaries continue to increase. So it's something that I'm aware of and that I care very much about. At the same time, I'm also familiar with higher education at many institutions outside of the United States, where the majority of their funding comes from the government. Right. One of the reasons that costs at private institutions have gone up is because the federal and state governments have actually been disinvesting in higher education in general, and that just doesn't work. It doesn't work if you want to pay reasonable salaries to people in higher education. And I think most of us believe that many of our educators are actually underpaid, not overpaid. Right. So that is a conflict when you have an industry that's based on individualized, personalized education, that by nature what we do has a low faculty to student ratio. That's why it's so successful. So we are in a bit of a conundrum in which we must depend on both aid and the generosity of others to recognize the importance and the value of higher education, because the main reason our costs go up are because salaries go up in the institution. And I'm not quite sure how to support educators and teachers without giving them reasonable salaries. So, and yes, we're familiar with all the different kinds of state loans as well as federal loans.
Similar situation with us. MCC is a state school. We, over the years, have had, my goodness, I don't want to say offensive, but horrifying declines in support from the state government. You know what's going on in the state you live in. In order to meet the needs of our students and our workers equitably, we have attempted to take cuts on our end in our operating budget. As a matter of fact, last spring, MCC took nearly $1 million cut in operating funds in order not to raise tuition for this new year. Whether or not we could keep doing that, I doubt it, right? We'd lose all of our talent. Folks would go elsewhere. I mean, we're right in the middle of Massachusetts saying, hey, we're going to start giving free tuition. And New York, we're already giving free tuition. So I'll lose all of my talent. They'll say, I'll go work in Massachusetts or New York. They don't seem to be having the same financial crisis that Connecticut does. And a lot of it is also about this idea, this new philosophy that Dr. Berger-Sweeney referenced, the devaluing of higher education in general, where folks I've seen, where when you tell your students and do not read the comments after articles. I'm one of those people who just has to read the comments after articles, and I look and I read things like, oh, those faculty, they only work 13 hours a week anyway, so they should take the pay cuts, and they should, but just like the state's fees are being raised for every other worker, faculty are state workers, and they have to take on those rises in cost of living. So we then have to attempt to meet those needs for faculty as well. And unfortunately, it's difficult sometimes to meet both of those needs at the same time. Most of my operating costs is personnel. Right? And 95% of that personnel is of a collective bargaining unit. So there are things that are outside of my hands that I can't do anything about anyway, even if I wanted to. So we're put in that position where we have to go out as presidents and executive level staff to say, hey, you got any extra money you want to donate to us to meet the gap that the state has now withdrawn from us? We never thought we'd be in this position, but I imagine 30, 40 years ago, Connecticut never thought they'd be in this position either. So, and yes, we're aware of all of the the loaning companies. Sometimes we are sadly aware of predatory loaning companies as well, where our students, again, are not as educated, so they fall for those types of financial scams as well. So, yeah, we have to stay abreast. Thank you for mentioning it.
Thank you.
For one
last
short question.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Doris Arrington, Capital Community College. And I want to go back to the question of financial aid. And I know that's a challenge for everybody with state and federal cuts. But two examples we have where financial aid makes a difference, especially for low-income students. And it's in all the research and stuff. But many years ago, I was in Amherst, and the then president of Amherst College, a friend of mine, made a decision to, and they had a huge endowment, of course, as many people know, but still he made this decision to go beyond paying tuition and room and board and those types of things to give students extra money.
Right.
And the retention rate, particularly students of color, which he was interested in maintaining, increased. He gave them money actually to go home at least once a year because many of those students were not
Weren't
even
from
going
the
home.
area, right.
And that makes a difference, or they go home and never come back because they didn't see
They
their
couldn't,
family.
right.
We also saw, of course, the example of President Obama in year-round Pell, and the idea that institutions could also award funds for additional expenses, because the number one reason for students, low-income students leaving institutions has
financial.
to do with money. It has nothing
Right.
to do with academic ability, and that's
Exactly.
really sad when we see, a lot of wasted talent. So. I don't know, I guess what are institutions doing that's creative to help low-income students, meet their needs beyond, tuition and room and board?
Right. On our campus, I mentioned this briefly, we are attempting to create wraparound services. Because we're a commuter campus, we don't think about, or we didn't think about room and board, things of that nature until we started hearing from students in their personal stories of, I slept in my car last night, or I am house hopping from friend to friend to friend. So we are partnering with, the YWCA. We've partnered with Food Share to create what we call the Cougar Pantry, is our food pantry, so that students can come in anonymously. Sometimes I'll have the bags in my office if you don't want to go to the food pantry because of the stigma attached to it. You come see me. I'm one person, and I am certainly not judgmental. So, we have those kinds of services. We're working on after-school daycare, because even with our child development center, some students need that care after 4. We're there from 9 to 4, right? So they need that care after 4, and they need it to be affordable. We completed a grant application, so keep your fingers crossed that we'll hear in November that will help finance that after-school care for our students, because unfortunately we can't afford to just give that money out of our operating budget right now. Our foundation, like I said earlier, is working on creating committees that will seek out students' needs and help to distribute the funds that we do have to support those areas. We've got the clothing closet on campus, so that students have come to me and said, I can't go on this interview, I don't have a dress, I don't have a suit. So, they've worked hard academically. They've gotten the 3.5, the 4.0. They have qualified for the internship. They can't make it to the interview, right? So we are well aware of what's going on, and we're also well aware that the state is not funding us at the same rates that it used to. So we are trying to be creative, and it may be in fits and starts, but we're getting there.
There's lots that I can say, but I know we're coming to a close. But I will share with you one story, and that is of a donor who is actually from here in Hartford and came to me and said, I want to endow a fund for you to give out money to individuals, particularly juniors and seniors who are having trouble just finishing because of circumstances in their families. So we just, for example, paid for a student to go home to Africa because his father passed, and otherwise he would not have been able to go to his father's funeral. So we're able very often to meet individual needs, and we were fortunate enough that a donor, gave us a significant endowment to be able to meet some of those immediate needs. So it's possible that people care very specifically about something like that. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Wanda Correa. I'm a Senior Development Officer here at the Hartford Foundation. I want to just have you join me in thanking the panelists today and my colleague, Jennyfer Holmes. I also want to let you know that Dr. Zulma Torro sends her regrets. She had an unforeseen event happen this morning, and sometimes life happens, and she regrets that she was not able to join us. This will conclude for us our donor series for 2018. And I know some of you have been with us for each one of our series. We thank you for joining us. We, as a foundation, are very committed to making sure that our donors and community members are aware of certain topics and areas that deserve to be talked about, and we are happy to have been able to, throughout this year, to bring some of those experts to join us to take some high-level views on some of these topics. So we ask you to continue to have a conversation. We have some more food, we have some more coffee, and we thank you very much for joining us this morning.